Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for having me on, Brad. Apollo Chamber Players, I founded 15 years ago. To this coming season at our 15th anniversary. MoonStrike is our sixth album. Our mission is to connect communities and cultures through globally inspired music. And I think all of our albums and our programs, our main stage programs, I think what we're really interested in doing is telling these stories through music and through the lives of new composers.
You're called the Apollo Chamber Players,
Yes.
obviously, and you're from Houston, so it seems like a natural fit that you would turn to music inspired by the moon and by the moon landings. I'm curious, first of all, where the name Apollo came from, how you decided on that, and then we're going to talk about the music on the album Moonstrike.
Sure. Well, since I've been a young boy, I think maybe since I was 8 or 9, I've always wanted to be an astronaut. I was always interested in space travel, and I read all of the space book, especially the Voyager spacecraft. Really piqued my interest when I was a young boy, and especially the Apollo moon landing. I just was always so fascinated with how we were able to land on the moon. Um, Music became more a part of my life as I got a little bit older, and I realized I was not, science and math were not my strong suits. So I obviously I made it. I came to Houston, Texas, in 1999. I studied music at the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University, and pursued music. When I left school, I became a little disillusioned with the orchestra audition scene. I did a number of auditions around the country. I never landed that job with the New York Philharmonic. So a friend of mine named Timothy Peters, we founded Apollo Chamber Players in 2008. One of my passions did come through very early with Apollo in naming it Apollo, inspired by our wonderful city of Houston, Texas. Space, it's called, one of Houston's nicknames is Space City Houston, and obviously Mission Control is here, Space Center Houston is here. So the name was always a bit of an homage to the city in which we live. And then also we found our niche in really exploring the many different cultures that live in Houston, Texas. So by many metrics, today Houston is more diverse than even New York City, one of the most multicultural cities in the world. So those two things kind of mesh together very well. And through the years, a lot of our albums have explored many different cultures, as you alluded to. And this opportunity in 2019 came up to do something interesting to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing, this historic human event. And I think one night that this hit me like a bolt of lightning. This commission idea hit me like a bolt of lightning one evening while I was brainstorming for a space-themed program. And in fact, I think somewhere in my brain, I remembered my 8th grade astronomy teacher, who happened to also have American Indian heritage. His name was Mr. Saltner. He would kind of mix his lectures and his classes with about space and astronomy with his Native American heritage. And I think there's a really natural link between the two. So I sleuthed a little bit on the internet, and I came upon Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, who's one of the only active American Indian classical composers. Our mission's aligned. I got in touch with him, and we kind of worked out the theme and the ideas for this Moonstrike commission.
Tell us the premise behind this work, because it alludes a lot to, it tells stories from the American Indian culture, but it also has an astronaut narrating it, who's quite an actor, by the way. Uh, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the piece, the structure of the piece.
Sure, the piece is in 3 main movements, and it's bookended by this Calusa corn dance that is used for the corn dance ceremonies. But just to go back a little bit further again too, when I was talking with Jerod about this project, I think I had mentioned, hey, maybe we could use a Native American Indian instrument in here, or maybe there's some kind of narration that can be involved. And he said, well, you know what? One of my great friends is John Harrington, who was the first American Indian to fly in space. He flew on the space shuttle in 2002 that helped construct part of the space station. and he since has a very robust career. He's a retired astronaut now, but he does a lot of speaking engagements, and as you said, he's a wonderful actor as well, and his personality just shines through. So when Jerod suggested this, an astronaut, I was like, hey, this is right up my alley. This is a beautiful idea. John became an integral part of this project, and I think because these stories also, he's Chickasaw as well, like Jerod, and I think, I think these two wonderful American Indian representatives of their culture, it really shines through in telling these rich American Indian stories, which are from several different tribes, and they're thousands of years old. And I think some of them involve trickster tales. I think some of them also have they can align with present day and kind of teach some life lessons as well.
Now, there are other works on this disc, and three living composers. It's wonderful and interesting music. And I do want to point out there's a connection between WGTE and this album in the sense that we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the moon landings in Wapakoneta. We broadcast from the Neil Armstrong Museum. Because Neil Armstrong was from Wapakoneta. So we got to talk with a lot of folks that knew him and worked with him.
Fantastic.
And our signal reaches there, our over-the-air signals. So, they're a part of our listening area. And also Jennifer Higdon went to school just south of here. And Jennifer and I work on a radio series together about new music. So there's a natural connection there as well. I wonder if you can talk about Jennifer Higdon's piece and how it came to be included on this album.
Sure. I will say that I believe more than many other composers today, Jennifer is able to tap into the cultural zeitgeist, if you will, of the moment. How, the public, how we are as humans are evolving as listeners and consumers of music and the media. And I think she does this while retaining the integrity of her craft and her vision as a composer. And maybe that's a long way of saying that I think that in today's society where attention spans are so short and bifurcated in many ways, I think that her music still can cut through that noise, if you will, and grab a hold of the listener. I think that In the Shadow of the Mountain, which is our by Jennifer, which is based in part on her opera of the same name, Cold Mountain, by her opera Cold Mountain that was premiered by the Santa Fe Opera Company. She took kind of fragments and ideas of this and reorchestrated it into string quartet version. And I think because of that, the piece has a much more personal and intimate way of connecting with the listener. And because we put this together during COVID, we were supposed to premiere this in 2020, in May of 2020, as kind of the big showcase bookend to our 20 by 2020 multicultural commissioning project. We commissioned 20 pieces in the span of about 6 or 7 years, inspired by multicultural music, and this was to be the last one. Unfortunately, COVID changed all that. But instead, we worked with Jennifer over Zoom, and we sent recordings of our rehearsals, and she would send back reams of notes, and then finally, over a few months, she sent back a note and said, "Hey, we fixed everything that I want to fix. I love what you're doing. Let's do a recording now." So we did a kind of a virtual live premiere, which was a really special thing in its own way, because we as the performers were able to enjoy the piece virtually with people around the world at the same time as they were writing about, hey, that was a beautiful melody in the viola, or man, that the cello and the violin line, their melody really connected in a way that I'd never heard before. So that was an interesting experience. And we took it to the studio to record with Azika Records in the summer of 2020. 2021, this past summer. And then we presented a live world premiere this past May here in Houston, Texas, for a live audience. So we kind of learned this piece intimately in a different way than we would have if we would have just done the premiere for people and then taken it in the recording and then taking it on tour. It was a little bit backwards than we were used to. But Jennifer will also agree that the time that we spent together on this piece it's in all of our DNAs in a way that it wouldn't have been otherwise, and I hope that comes through in the recording.
Yeah. Let's talk about Pierre Jalbert. You mentioned you went to Rice University, and he's still on faculty there, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
He was actually one of my theory professors when I was a junior.
Oh, okay. Well, he writes beautiful music, and this piece is very different, I think, from the pieces that came before. I love how it ends with that little bit of fiddling from the strings. I wonder if you can talk about Pierre Jalbert and this piece that he wrote for you, "The Spirit of the North."
In the spirit, l'Esprit du Nord. Yes, this was the 18th, excuse me, the 17th commission of our commissioning project, and I think in some ways this one's very special too. I mean, Pierre has a wonderful reputation. I think he also, in maybe a different way than Jennifer does, writes in a way that's expressive and while also pushing the boundaries of tonality. And I think particularly the first movement of this piece, it's a theme and variations. We've commissioned, dozens and dozens of works at this time, by now, and he's the first person to ever come back with a piece that was in theme and variations using this kind of folk material in this very interesting way. So that I think the first movement is kind of representative of Pierre's writing in many ways. I think the second movement is based on a hymn, is also very expressive, especially in the way that he uses the hymn tune, and then also the field recording that's embedded in the beginning and the end of this piece. I think it's very beautiful, and it kind of connects different epochs, if you will. And then, like you said, the last movement, the fiddle dance, is just super fun to play. I actually grew up playing this kind of music with my family. My mother's a violin teacher, and my father is a guitar player and folk singer. So we like to joke that my mom played the first class music, and my dad played the coach class music in my family. But I have two younger brothers that also play violin, and we would do programs. We were kind of like the Detrick von Trapp family. And one of the things we mix Mozart and Beethoven and Bach with fiddle tunes and that sort of thing. So kind of the idea for Apollo, I've always been mixing genres and playing different styles of music in my life, and Apollo in a way is an extension of that.
Now, as a group, Apollo chamber players, I mean, any kind of string quartet, they go beyond just performing. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, you mentioned that the 20 pieces that you commissioned, two of which is the MoonStrike also part of that project?
That is the 18th commission of that project.
Okay,
yes.
so you got 17, 18, and 20 on this disc from that
And then the
project.
19th is We Will Sing One Song by Yves Beglarian. That's our Armenian-inspired commission. We actually put that on our disc last year with Malice Toward None. We were able to stitch that together with an Armenian duduk player in Armenia in his studio, and a really wonderful percussionist named Pejman Haddadi in LA. And then we recorded our string portions here. And the composer did some electronics herself while she was in her Mahler cabin in the Vermont woods. We like to dub it her Mahler cabin. That's where she escaped during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So that was a global digital collaboration, and that will finally see its live premiere for people here in Houston at the end of our 15th anniversary season this year in May. So we're excited to, COVID scrambled everything for so many people in so many different ways. But I think looking back, I'm very pleased at how we were able to, reimagine our programming, and also kind of the relationship that we formed with some of these composers that wouldn't have been the same had it not been for the challenges of the time. Well, one of the things that I love to talk about, and when we can, it's wonderful to work with a composer that's also a performer. So, for instance, Pamela Z, she was also on our With Malice Toward None album last year. She, as you probably know, is a performer herself. Big folk influences in her life, especially folk rock. So our piece titled "The Unraveling," and it's inspired by folk rock from her childhood. But in those cases, it's wonderful. For instance, we did this premiere in 2019. We had never met her, and she came down, and we spent a whole week rehearsing with her. And obviously, because she's the composer and the performer, in the mix of rehearsing, she's able to change things as she's inspired to, and maybe we can add our 2 cents as well, as the performer. So that's a really special experience. And then of course going on stage with and being in a performing aspect with the composer is it's truly rewarding. It's really wonderful.
You guys do anything besides play music that you've commissioned?
We do, and I want to say that one of the reasons why we're called chamber players is because we like to think larger than just a quartet. But the core of Apollo is a string quartet, even though in the majority of our commissions are for something larger than a string quartet. I say that on this disc here, we have a couple of really wonderful string quartet commissions by Jennifer and Pierre. But yeah, I think also performing more standard repertoire like Beethoven, like a Beethoven string quartet, in the context like we did last year, with a work by Kima Williams, our piece with Tracy Silverman, the electric violinist. I mean, that I think is something that is hopefully set us apart from other ensembles and other string quartets, in the sense that we can shine light on how Beethoven was somebody that was very attuned to the politics and social unrest of his time, and relay and bring that to the 21st century and what we're going through with this unfortunate slide towards autocracy, in many countries around the world, and in some senses, here in the United States. So I think thinking about composers and and how they were writing, how they were living when they were around, and how that's manifested through their music, and how that reflects today's society. I think that is what we're charged to do, and that's what really I think is important with our programming.
Yeah. Now you guys have a documentary coming out, I saw.
We do, yes. Thank you. Moonshot.
Is that like a video documentary, or is there a lot of music in it, performing, or what is it exactly? Because it's not out yet on some of the aggregators like Amazon.com.
Yeah, it'll be on Amazon, I think later in September, and another streaming platform called Tubi, and then it'll be on a Blu-ray disc. But essentially, my vision for this documentary was much smaller than it ended up being. I really just wanted to document our, the kind of the ending of our 20 by 2020 project, and just make sure that we had something out there that showed all the work that it went to and the wonderful composers that were part of it. And then, as I was thinking about which, so the documentarian and the videographer is named Jeffrey Mills. He's based here in Houston. He has a really wonderful reputation. But his vision too, he said, I think we should take one of your commissions and kind of follow the process, and I think that'll be an interesting story to tell for a documentary. So what he did, obviously we thought the MoonStrike commission with Jerod and John fit the bill perfectly for this. So he followed us around for some of our rehearsals, and then we shot the interview footage at Space Center Houston, which I think was very appropriate setting, and and ended up being a feature length 170-minute documentary. It's won some awards around the country, and we're just so happy that it'll be able to reach more people on these streaming and video on demand platforms.
Yeah.
Coinciding with our MoonStrike release. So as you mentioned, I think there's behind the scenes footage that normally someone will not see, like putting together the nuts and bolts of these commissions. For me, that's sometimes that's the most fun part of putting together commissions, is working with composers and doing these all the fine tuning details. And I know for me, when I watch a documentary, I think the most interesting part is kind of the process, right? So what we're giving people through this is the process, and then a little bit of the performance as well.
Well, the album is called MoonStrike, the title track by Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. Also new works by Jennifer Higdon and Pierre Jalbert. It's coming out September 2nd on Azika Records. I want to thank Matthew Detrick, who is violinist, founder of the group, thanks for joining us and telling us a little bit about this new album.
It was a pleasure to be here, Brad. Thank you so much.